The spotlight blazed down on the elegant banquet hall as 5 distinguished men in sharp suits stepped forward, their eyes fixed on the frail woman sitting at the head table. Her silver hair caught the light like a halo, and her weathered hands trembled slightly as she clutched a tissue. The audience of 300 fell silent, sensing something extraordinary was about to unfold. "What you're about to witness," the master of ceremonies announced, his voice thick with emotion, "will challenge everything you think you know about family, love, and second chances." But to understand this moment, we need to travel back 25 years to a cramped social services office where a woman named Margaret Chen sat across from a skeptical caseworker about to make a decision that would change the world. Margaret Chen had known heartbreak in ways that would crush most people. At 45, she had already buried her husband David and their 8-year-old daughter Lucy, victims of a drunk driver who walked away without a scratch. The accident had left her world shattered, her home echoing with memories, and her heart carrying a grief so profound that most days she wondered how she kept breathing. But Margaret was different. Where others might have retreated into bitterness, she channeled her pain into purpose. 3 years after losing her family, she sat in that sterile office, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. "I want to adopt them all," she told Sharon Martinez, the overworked social worker who had seen too many good intentions crumble under harsh realities. Sharon's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. "Mrs. Chun, we're talking about 5 boys. 5 traumatized, difficult boys that multiple families have already returned. These aren't typical adoptions." The files spread across Sharon's desk told stories that would make hardened professionals weep. Marcus Williams, 15, had bounced through 7 foster homes, accumulating charges for theft and vandalism. His file noted severe trust issues and oppositional behavior. Devon Jackson, 14, hadn't spoken a word in 2 years after watching his mother's boyfriend beat her unconscious. Isaiah Parker, 13, had been labeled intellectually delayed and struggled in every academic setting. Carlos Rodriguez, 12, had a reputation for explosive violence that had landed him in juvenile detention twice. And Tommy Morrison, just 8 years old, had been abandoned at a hospital and suffered from severe attachment disorder. "Nobody wants them together," Sharon continued, her voice gentler now. "Most families won't even consider one of them, let alone all 5. Margaret's brown eyes never wavered. "Then they need someone who will." The first meeting took place in a sterile conference room that smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams. Margaret arrived early, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she waited. When the door opened and 5 boys shuffled in, she saw past their defensive postures and hostile glares to something deeper: 5 wounded souls who had learned that love was temporary and adults were liars. Marcus, the oldest, immediately took charge, his lean frame tense with authority. "So you're the lady who thinks she wants all of us?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. "What's your angle? Money? Attention? Because we've heard it all before." Devon hung back in the shadows, his eyes darting between Margaret and the exit, calculating escape routes. Isaiah fidgeted with his hands, his round face creased with confusion about why anyone would want him. Carlos stood with fists clenched, his small body radiating anger like heat from a furnace. Tommy, the youngest, hid behind Marcus, his thumb in his mouth despite being 8 years old. Margaret looked at each boy individually, taking her time. When she spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm here to make you a promise. If you come home with me, you'll never have to worry about being sent away again. Home means forever. You can test me, push me, and try to make me give up, but I won't. That's not a threat, it's a guarantee." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Yeah, right. That's what they all say." "Maybe," Margaret replied. "But I'm not them. I lost my family 3 years ago, and I know what it feels like to be completely alone. The difference is, I chose to be alone. You boys never had a choice. I'm offering you one now. Hashtag the storm before the calm." The first 6 months were a war zone. Margaret's modest 3-bedroom house became a battlefield where 5 boys tested every boundary, challenged every rule, and pushed their new mother to her absolute limits. Marcus disappeared for 3 days straight, sleeping in abandoned buildings and surviving on stolen food, only to return when hypothermia nearly killed him. When Margaret found him shivering on the front porch, she didn't lecture or punish. She wrapped him in blankets and made hot chocolate, waiting until he was ready to talk. Devon maintained his silence like a fortress wall, communicating only through angry gestures and slammed doors. When Margaret discovered him cutting words into his arm with a broken pencil, she quietly bandaged his wounds and began leaving encouraging notes in his lunchbox, never expecting a response. Isaiah came home crying daily, his backpack torn and his homework destroyed by bullies who called him retard and freak. Margaret marched into that school like an avenging angel, demanding proper support and threatening lawsuits until they provided it. Carlos's rage erupted without warning over burnt toast, a misplaced toy, or simply the wrong look at the wrong moment. He put holes in walls, broke dishes, and once threw a chair through a window. Margaret absorbed his fury like a storm shelter, never retaliating, always standing firm. Tommy regressed completely, wetting the bed, sucking his thumb, and clinging to Margaret's leg whenever she tried to leave. His night terrors were so severe that Margaret began sleeping in a chair beside his bed, singing lullabies at 3 a.m. The neighbors whispered and pointed. Margaret's sister begged her to come to her senses and give up this insane project. Social workers arrived for unannounced visits, clipboards ready to document failures. The boys overheard these conversations and felt their worst fears confirmed they were too broken to be loved. But Margaret never wavered. She worked 3 jobs to pay for therapy, tutoring, and medical bills. She learned about trauma responses, attachment disorders, and childhood PTSD. She transformed her garage into an art studio when she noticed Isaiah drawing on every available surface. She installed a punching bag in the basement for Carlos to channel his anger. She read to Tommy every night, even when he screamed and threw books across the room. The first breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday evening in March. Margaret had been battling the flu for a week, dragging herself through daily routines while burning with fever. She collapsed at the dinner table, her face pale as paper, and Devon's silent Devon, who hadn't spoken in over 2 years, suddenly shouted, "Mom's sick! Somebody help her." The word mom hung in the air like a miracle. Devon's eyes widened in shock at his own voice, but he didn't retreat back into silence. Instead, he helped Margaret to bed and organized his brothers to make soup and clean the house. It was the first time they had worked together instead of against each other. Marcus's breakthrough came differently. Margaret found him one night sitting on the roof outside his bedroom window, staring at an old photograph of his birth mother who had abandoned him at age 3. Tears streamed down his face, the first tears she had ever seen him shed. "She looks like she loved me in this picture," he whispered when Margaret climbed out to join him. "But if she loved me, why did she leave?" Margaret didn't offer easy answers or false comfort. Sometimes people who love us are too broken to show it the right way. That doesn't mean you weren't worth loving. It means they didn't know how to love themselves. Marcus leaned against her shoulder, and for the first time, he felt like someone understood his pain without trying to fix it. Isaiah's moment came during a parent-teacher conference where his teacher suggested he be moved to a special needs classroom. Margaret watched her quiet, sensitive boy shrink in his chair, his face burning with shame. "Isaiah creates the most beautiful art I've ever seen," Margaret said firmly. "He sees the world differently, and that's a gift, not a disability. If you can't recognize his intelligence, that's your limitation, not his." That night, Isaiah knocked on Margaret's bedroom door, holding a sketch he had drawn of their family. In the picture, Margaret stood in the center with her arms wide enough to encompass all 5 boys, and above them he had written in careful letters, "My mom sees me." Carlos's transformation began when Tommy was being bullied at school by older kids. Carlos arrived like a miniature hurricane, his 12-year-old frame blazing with protective fury. But instead of his usual explosive violence, he stood between Tommy and the bullies and said, "He's my little brother. You want to hurt him, you go through me." The bullies backed down. But more importantly, Carlos realized his anger could be a force of protection instead of destruction. He began channeling his intensity into martial arts and youth sports, learning discipline and control. Tommy's breakthrough was perhaps the most poignant. After living with Margaret for almost a year, his birth grandmother appeared, claiming she wanted him back. The court scheduled a visit, and Tommy was terrified that he would be forced to leave the only stable home he had ever known. As he packed his small suitcase, tears streaming down his face, he looked up at Margaret and whispered, "I don't want to go. You're my real mom now." Margaret knelt down to his level, her own eyes glistening. "Tommy, no matter what happens, you'll always be my son. Love doesn't disappear just because people go away. I love my daughter Lucy even after she died, and I will love you no matter where you are." When the visit ended, Tommy ran into Margaret's arms and sobbed, "I want to stay home. I want to stay with my family." The grandmother, seeing the depth of love and stability Margaret provided, withdrew her petition. Tommy was home to stay. By the second year, the chaos began settling into rhythm. Margaret established family traditions that gave the boys something to belong to. Sunday dinners became sacred: no phones, no television, just conversation and connection. Each boy got to choose the menu on his birthday and help cook his favorite meal. She created individual rituals, too. Saturday mornings with Marcus became college preparation time, where they researched scholarships and planned his future in medicine. Devon joined the school newspaper and began using his voice to advocate for other foster children. Isaiah's artwork began appearing in local galleries, his confidence growing with each sale. Carlos became team captain of his wrestling squad and started mentoring younger boys in anger management. Tommy flourished academically once his learning differences were properly supported. The community slowly began to see the Chen family differently. Instead of the crazy lady with the problem kids, Margaret became known as the woman who worked miracles. Teachers called her for advice on difficult students. Other foster families sought her guidance. The boys' former social workers used their story as inspiration for other placements. But Margaret never let success go to her head. Every night, she tucked each boy into bed with the same words: "Tomorrow is a new day to be better than today. I love you exactly as you are, and I'm proud of exactly who you're becoming." The teenage years brought new challenges: college applications, girlfriend drama, identity crises, and the typical rebellion that comes with growing up. But the foundation Margaret had built held strong. Marcus graduated valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to medical school. During his graduation speech, he thanked the mother who saw a future in me when I couldn't see past tomorrow. Devon overcame his social anxiety to become student body president and captain of the debate team. He spent his senior year creating a peer counseling program for other students dealing with trauma. Isaiah's art was featured in a major exhibition titled Invisible Children, Finding Voice Through Art. The centerpiece was a large canvas showing 5 boys standing in darkness, while a woman's silhouette reached toward them with light pouring from her hands. Carlos earned a wrestling scholarship and planned to study criminal justice. His goal was to become a police officer who specialized in working with at-risk youth. "I want to be the cop I needed when I was a kid," he explained. Tommy, the baby of the family, grew into a gentle giant with a gift for working with special needs children. His teachers marveled at his patience and empathy, qualities born from his own early struggles. Margaret's 60th birthday party was a celebration of triumph. Her 5 sons, now successful young men, gathered with their wives and children to honor the woman who had changed their lives. But privately, Margaret had been struggling with memory lapses and confusion that she tried to hide. The diagnosis came 6 months later: early onset dementia, progressing faster than doctors expected. The woman who had spent 15 years caring for everyone else now needed care herself. But her boys didn't hesitate. Marcus, now Dr. Marcus Williams, coordinated her medical care. Devon took leave from his job as a social worker to manage her daily needs. Isaiah moved back home to help with her physical care. Carlos handled all the finances and legal matters. Tommy, still in college, drove home every weekend to spend time with her. They hired nurses and arranged for the best possible treatment. But they also did something more important. They loved her the way she had loved them, unconditionally and without reservation. As Margaret's memory faded, she sometimes forgot their names or faces. But she never forgot the feeling of being surrounded by love. In her clearer moments, She would look at them with wonder and whisper, "How did I get so lucky? How did I end up with such beautiful sons?" Which brings us back to that banquet hall, where 5 distinguished men stood before their aging mother. The audience included doctors Margaret had worked with, teachers who had seen her advocacy, neighbors who had watched her transformation of 5 broken boys, and dozens of young people whose lives had been touched by her story. Marcus stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. 25 years ago, a social worker told our mother that nobody wanted us. She was wrong. One person wanted us, and that made all the difference. Devon continued, "But tonight isn't about us. It's about revealing what we spent the last 2 years planning in secret. Mom always said that love multiplies when you share it, so we decided to share hers." Isaiah gestured to a large screen that descended from the ceiling. Images began flowing: architectural plans, construction photos, and finally, a beautiful building with a sign that read Margaret's house, where love multiplies. Carlos explained, "We've built a home for children that nobody else wants. Kids like we used to be. Kids who need someone to believe in them the way Mom believed in us." Tommy, now 25 and working as a special education teacher, added, "We've endowed it fully. It will never close, never turn away a child, and never give up on anyone, just like Mom never gave up on us." The screen showed the interior of Margaret's house bedrooms designed for comfort and safety, classrooms equipped with the latest technology, art studios, music rooms, and recreational facilities. But more importantly, it showed the first group of children who had already moved in, children whose faces glowed with the same hope that had once transformed 5 hopeless boys. Margaret struggled to stand, her sons quickly supporting her. Through tears and fading memory, she looked at each of them and then at the audience. Her voice was soft but clear. "I thought I was saving them, but they saved me. When I lost Lucy and David, I thought my purpose died with them. These boys showed me that love never dies, it just finds new ways to grow." The audience erupted in applause, but Margaret wasn't finished. "I want every person here to remember something. Every child deserves a champion. Every child deserves someone who believes in them absolutely. You don't have to adopt 5 kids to make a difference. You just have to see the invisible ones and refuse to look away." Margaret Chen passed away peacefully 2 years later, surrounded by her 5 sons, their families, and a room full of love. Her funeral was attended by over 1,000 people, former students, fellow parents, social workers, teachers, and dozens of young adults who called her Mom, even though she had never officially adopted them. Margaret's house thrived under the leadership of her sons. Devon left his government job to become its full-time director, using his understanding of trauma to create revolutionary programs for healing. Marcus provided medical care and consulted on mental health services. Isaiah taught art therapy classes that helped children express emotions they couldn't verbalize. Carlos developed safety protocols and discipline policies based on respect rather than punishment. Tommy created educational programs that recognized different learning styles and celebrated every child's unique gifts. But perhaps the most beautiful part of Margaret's legacy was how it multiplied. The children who graduated from Margaret's house went on to become foster parents, teachers, social workers, and advocates. They carried forward her message that every child deserves unconditional love and unlimited chances. The original 5 boys, now men in their 40s, still gathered every Sunday for dinner, continuing the tradition Margaret had started. Their own children grew up knowing the story of their grandmother, who proved that families aren't just born. They're built through choice, commitment, and endless love. Marcus, now chief of pediatrics at the city's largest hospital, specialized in treating children from difficult backgrounds. Devon headed the state's Foster Care Reform Commission, revolutionizing how society cared for its most vulnerable children. Isaiah's Art Foundation provided scholarships and mentorship for young artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. Carlos became police chief and transformed how law enforcement interacted with troubled youth. Tommy, a beloved principal, created schools where every child felt seen and valued. Each of them kept Margaret's photograph in their office, along with the same promise she had made to them 25 years earlier. Home means forever. And in Margaret's house, where new children arrived each week scared, angry, and convinced they were unlovable, those words welcomed them home. On the wall of the main entrance, carved in beautiful script, was Margaret's most important lesson. Love multiplies when you share it. The story of Margaret Chen and her 5 sons proved that one person's choice to love unconditionally could create ripples that touch thousands of lives. It showed that the children nobody wants often become the adults everybody needs. And it demonstrated that the most powerful force in the universe isn't wealth, fame, or power, but a mother's love that refuses to give up. If Margaret's story moved you, I want to challenge you with something. Right now, in your community, there are children waiting for someone to believe in them. They might be in foster care, struggling in school, or simply feeling invisible in their own families. You don't have to adopt 5 kids to make a difference. You just have to see the invisible ones and refuse to look away. Maybe it's volunteering as a tutor, becoming a foster parent, or simply being the adult who notices when a child is struggling. Margaret Chen was just an ordinary woman who made an extraordinary choice. That same choice is available to each of us every single day.